Brucite. Brucite dreaded visiting the manor of Lady Androdite. Her warriors must have kept track of the crusade party's movements since they had entered her lands, and it made him nervous about arriving at their central hive. He dreaded presenting himself to the lady at her court when he knew his first crush would see what he had made of himself, a lower-tiered private in their Low King's regional army. Essentially nothing. At least during the march, Brucite masked his reluctance to proceed toward the manor. Ever since Basil had stripped Teleost of his pretentious and cynical attitude, the fisherman had become bearable to talk to, and Brucite was trying to understand his underlying personality. The day they were to arrive at Lady Androdite's estate, T-15 drummed his fingers incessantly against the bronze plate that covered his side. "You're more wired than a butterfly basilisk spotting the heat signature for its next meal," Basil said to their silent friend. T-15 refused to respond, but his anticipatory energy persisted. The crusade arrived upon the largest Carry village between First and Second Sun High. Along the cleared stone paths, wooden structures for housing protruded from the earth to offer shelter from the snow and wind, but none were to the scale of Brucite's home city. The mud smeared between the planks was also an unconventional building style. Some of the Carry men and women followed their group, approaching on 2 legs, but then scampering away on all 4s. Some sniffed in their direction, and some threw mistrusting glares to the passing soldiers. As part of their custom, all of the adults and most of the children wore pelts of animals they had personally slain and skinned. Their hair was either unkempt or twisted into thick plaits. Most had at least one weapon on their person, even if they were also carrying children. Everything he had learned from his first trip to their village flooded back to Brucite. Basil studied the sights around them. "I bet they have great coats for sale." "I don't remember if they accept gem and coin as currency. They might only barter with goods," Brucite said. "And their pelts are exceptional. If you can get one, you shouldn't let anything ruin it." "Did you have one from the first time you visited?" Teleost asked. "I did, but I outgrew it. Back then, the Carry were open to trading gem with us, as we were negotiating terms of becoming kin." "Makes sense. What animal was your pelt made of?" Basil asked. "Winter rabbits. Their fur was so soft. I'd kill for a wardrobe outfitted with their furs as liners." Brucite rubbed his thumb over his fingers as he recalled its feel. "Rabbits aren't the most aggressive animal. If you wanted to spark fear in battle, that is," Teleost said. "Sure, but it is the most comfortable. Plus, it would help to blend in with the snow. I wish I had had the foresight to get the rabbit's pelts that one time." Brucite nudged T-15, recalling their hazardous encounter in the woods with the Vahantry. T-15 didn't turn to look at him. Brucite frowned, disappointed that his friend wouldn't reminisce over shared memories. The muster horn blew to stop the procession. The crusade had arrived at the lady's banner. The soldiers, who were required to speak with the lady, maneuvered their way around those who did not. "I have to go," Brucite told his friends. "I'll see you all later." Then he too pushed his way through the stagnant crowd. It was a sluggish process, but his fellow soldiers of higher ranks and lower birth parted for him. The manor appeared much smaller than he remembered. Brucite recognized that it might be a squeeze to fit all with noble blood inside. His frown deepened at the thought of having to wait outside until he gained his audience with the lady. "I'll be the last in line for sure." Only then did he remember T-15. He had been at Lady Fernight's manor, so he should have to present himself here, too. It was too late to look for him, though. There was no way Brucite would find him in the crowd again. Brucite waited for a half-turn of the suns before he moved forward. The interior of the manor was much larger than it looked, because it was mostly underground. "Lady Androdite of Vetron's Carry region, I present myself, Brucite of Fonston, 17th son of Lord Gothite of Vetron's Wichu region, to you. I am in your service if you require anything of me, and I serve as a representative to my father's region, for I am currently the eldest of his children present in your domain," Brucite announced before the lady. Brucite also offered the honorific gesture of raising his hand to touch his forehead, then sweeping his hand down toward the lady with a nod to her as well. She sat on a seat carved from ghost caribou bones. He hoped she would not remember him, and would let him pass as she had with the soldier before him. Lady Androdite's furs were much more orderly than those of her people. They looked professionally cut and sewn. Pieces of her raven hair draped over the white pelts of maras of all creatures. Her black eyes bore into him. Brucite. Yes, my lady? Please try not to insult my daughters this time. He shifted his gaze downward, and his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Yes, my lady. How was I supposed to know her daughters didn't need protecting back then? Enjoy the reception until we move to the feast, she said, permitting Brucite to pass. He sighed as he wandered into the reception hall. A bronze first sergeant approached him. Brucite, how are you? Brucite recognized the man as the first son of Lord Carnelian, who ruled the Dempsey region, south of the Carries. Their father's regions competed in sea-based trade. Jasper, Brucite greeted. I hadn't realized you were attending the crusade. I've been here. You must have been distracted, Jasper said. His tone was light and jovial, but Brucite knew there were additional layers under it. As a firstborn child, Jasper would be an expert at the political game. I hear you've made friends with the healing mage's apprentice. There isn't any chance he told you the healing mage's words, has he? My senior officer keeps asking me for them. Someone high up wants to know. Brucite shook his head. I haven't heard of the mage's words, and it must have been rotations now. Is that myth still circulating? If leadership is so intrigued, they should just pick up a book and learn it for themselves, Brucite rambled, still feeling embarrassed by the lady's comments. Jasper stared at him a moment, and then laughed too loudly. I highly doubt they'd spend their time on that. How's business? To my knowledge, business is booming. My father signed to build another 2 docks to accommodate the increase in trading vessels. A new settlement of sea folk has also been established in our harbor, in anticipation of the additional work. Brucite detested this kind of conversation. It was what his mother and father and tutors had groomed him to do, but he would rather practice sword fighting with Basil and Taliost. That sounds favorable, Jasper said. How does business fare for you? Also healthy. We're establishing contracts with a few upstart merchants from Wojet and Bavati. And how is your family doing? Very well. My father most recently arranged for my youngest sister's engagement to King Citrine's son, Prince Cornerupine, when they come of age. And yours? Congratulations, that is exciting news, and a great honor for your family, Brucite said. Again, to my knowledge, they are well. I have been training in Sithica's academy for about a rotation, so I have not seen most of them in some time. On the rare occasions my father's in Sithica, he usually shares good news. Brucite wanted to punch himself in the face to get out of the politics. He couldn't beat the news of one of his siblings becoming betrothed to a royal family member, so he desperately wished to switch to a new subject. Ah, yes, Jasper said with a charismatic smile. I remember when I joined Citrine's army all those rotations back. Quite the rigorous process. The teachers back then would not stand for any misbehavior. I'm not sure if it's the same way now or not, but... Brucite didn't dislike Jasper, but the conversation could not hold his attention. His gaze wandered. Without all the helmets, he more readily recognized the noblemen he marched with. One in particular looked familiar. Brucite pardoned himself from his conversation with Jasper. He maneuvered around the nobles to reach T-15, but the soldier was too nimble in navigating around the bodies. Brucite pursued his friend out of the hall and around hallway bends. He thought it was odd there wasn't anyone else along the route. There were no servants or otherwise, but his main concern was to follow T-15. He preferred to pry a single word out of him rather than listen to Jasper's prattling. Once they had escaped the notice of the crowd, Brucite considered calling out to him. However, there was something about T-15's stealthy advance that intrigued Brucite. He didn't want to interrupt and risk leaving the little mystery unsolved. Deep corridors transitioned from stone to mud-caked walls, like the rest of the village. T-15 stopped in front of a large set of double doors. Glancing around, he stepped toward a nearby bench, opened it, and took out a pair of pelts stored in it. Then he shed his armor and placed it inside the storage bench for safekeeping. T-15 was thinner and curvier than Brucite had previously imagined the man to be under the armor. Brucite suspected the man was a Carry warrior, and wondered if he refused to speak because of limited knowledge of the common tongue. When T-15 took off his helmet, rivers of braided raven hair fell out. Brucite hadn't imagined the man having long hair, but it wasn't shocking if he was a carry. When T-15 had finished swapping pelts for armor, he turned toward the door, took a breath, and entered. It was only when Brucite saw T-15's profile that he realized T-15 was female. Specifically, she was the envoy he had seen in Sapphi at Lady Frenight's court. Brucite felt incredibly stupid. How did I not register that T-15 was a woman? He smacked himself in the head and worried that he'd be discovered by the slapping noise. But T-15 had already disappeared. His mind darted between their prior interactions. Her ability to slaughter the Vahantri made perfect sense. Her whole life she had to train to kill for survival. Out of curiosity, he followed her, opened one of the massive doors, and peeked through. Inside was a gigantic auditorium carved from clay and stone. Where the stage would have been was a massive rock formation that jutted toward the crowd below. Where the seats would have been was a slanted slab so that everyone in attendance could hear the proclamation from the rock. The doorway was shrouded in darkness, so he slid inside to get a better view. There must have been thousands of carry people gathered in the half auditorium, half cave. Atop the tallest rock stood Lady Androdite. Flanking her right on a shorter stone was a woman older than Brucite, probably in her late 20s. She reclined on the edge, one exposed leg dangling, and she twirled her foot like the tail of an intrigued cat. Though she was far, he thought she was attractive. She had the same long raven hair and birchwood skin as the rest of her people. You couldn't tell what animal her pelts were made of, but her coat had been dyed a deep heliotrope color. Lady Androdite's left stone, which was shorter than the other flanking side, stood vacant, but the remaining intermediary stones that jutted down and away from the center filled with children waiting in a crouched or meditation pose, sitting, or laying down. The crowd below the raised stones adopted similar stances. Lady Androdite was the only one who stood. T-15 cut through the crowd, leapt up the stones that the younger children sat on, greeted each of them in turn, and took her place in the open spot on the left flank of Lady Androdite. As she passed, the children stuck out their hands to touch her and stared up at her with awe. T-15 climbed up until she perched on the rock, balanced on her toes. Her hands suspended in front of her, ready to rest on the ground or to use if needed. Brucite wasn't sure what the relationship was between the older and younger women, but he could guess, and the feeling sunk in his gut. The lady beamed at the soldier and cupped her face delicately in greeting. When the lady addressed her assembly, it was in the tongue of their people. Few words were the same in their language as in the holy language, which gave him an idea of what she spoke about from time to time, but not with enough context. Generally, she spoke of strengthening connections. While the lady spoke, she incorporated copious hand gestures into the speech that Brucite was also not familiar with, but could occasionally guess what the individual signs meant. The spectacle was fascinating to behold. Lady Androdite was the absolute authority, and her voice reverberated around the area. Her words motivated the people, sometimes through severity, and sometimes through laughter. At one point, the lady gestured to T-15, and the crowd made noises of approval. Some slapped their hands against their legs, some banged against the wall, and some yelled. Everyone had their own noise-making preference. Brucite couldn't believe he had snuck into a private carry meeting. Outsiders speculated what the carry were like in private, but they were all wrong. They claimed they were not a people of learning or a people of culture, but from their assemblage, Brucite could discern they had traditions that foreigners like himself would never understand. Before the meeting concluded, Brucite forced himself to leave. He did not want to be discovered and face whatever repercussions might unfold for him. With difficulty, he navigated his way back to the reception hall, where the other noble-born still chattered away. He located Jasper again, at a table filled with freshly picked fruits and berries. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Jasper asked when Brucite approached again. "I was looking for the plumbing," Brucite said. "And yes, I did find it. I apologize for my quick departure. The rations have not been sitting well with me." "I couldn't agree with you more. You should try this berry medley. They might help with the plumbing in the future," Jasper joked, nudging Brucite. The holly, winter, and red berries were each plump and ripe. They looked delicious, especially after eating thawed food for every meal. Brucite wouldn't pass them up for an archangel's blessing. Brucite realized he had been too transfixed on the snacks. For the sake of making conversation, Brucite asked, "I'm still getting accustomed to the logistics of the army. How do we get promoted?" Jasper grinned. "When we all return, your first sergeant will present a report on everything that you did and send the report up the chain. Then the Major General will compare your performance with everyone else's and raise you based on merit. At the end of the crusade, I'm hoping to earn my knighthood and progress to an officer position." "What rank would be reasonable for a private to earn?" "I can't imagine they would keep you anywhere below a sergeant, if not higher. No one in our company has seen action before, but it would be a great chance to move up the ranks quickly." Brucite liked the sound of sergeant. He wouldn't disappoint his parents. The two young men grouped with others and expanded their networking circles. Brucite had met the people he spoke with before, but he didn't enjoy the conversation any more with them than he had with Jasper. Later, Lady Androdite returned with additional carry beside her. They were not the two women who had flanked her from earlier, but they appeared no less capable. The lady announced, "We will move into the dining area now." Brucite wanted to talk to T-15 about what he had seen, but he was unsure if he should look for her in her armor or her furs. Droves of people filed out of the reception area and into a formal dining room that rivaled his own manners. There were dozens of obscenely long tables to choose from, but Brucite still hadn't seen T-15. "Why don't we sit here?" Jasper called to Brucite. Brucite wanted to tell him he was looking for someone, but Jasper had already stumbled upon her. "Oh, okay," Brucite said as he encountered T-15 up close. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. His brain dropped all reasonable thought. Her dark hickory eyes studied him, and she adopted a playful expression. "Would you like to take a seat?" She gestured to the space on the bench opposite her. Jasper seized the opportunity to sit directly across from her. Brucite fumbled into place next to Jasper. A carry child sat next to T-15, and noble soldiers filled in the rest. "It's nice to meet you." She looked between Jasper and himself. "The pleasure's mine," Brucite said awkwardly. Suppressing a mocking smile, Jasper seemed to enjoy watching his peer stumble over his words in front of the attractive woman. "I'm Anataze of the Carry, second born to Lady Androdite." She introduced herself and the child sitting next to her. "And this is my younger half-brother, Unakite. He's 11th born." Brucite could not have been more mortified. He had confessed to having a crush on her from his childhood along the march. Muscles in his neck tensed, and he had to halt himself from shuddering. "We've met before." Brucite was unsure what else to say. He struggled to meet her eyes after the revelation, but he eventually forced himself to. "Yes, Brucite, we have. You were shorter when you visited last." Her posture, the way she carried herself, everything about her mannerisms were familiar, but he could not get past the shock of seeing her face. Her lightly freckled nose, her full lips, her face, all of it. He loved hearing her voice, and he wanted to make the most of the chance to speak to her. Thus far, he was doing a terrible job. Tad, Jasper, you haven't introduced yourself yet." Anate swiveled her gaze to Jasper, awaiting his introduction. While the pressure was off Brucite, he admired her without feeling pressure to speak. He liked the way her hair looked unbraided, pulled back and falling across a white wolf pelt in stark contrast as her mother's had. As far as Brucite could tell, Jasper had answered her question. When her eyes turned back to him, she asked, "Last time you were here, Brucite, your father was trying to marry you off. Have you had any luck since then?" "She knows the answer. Why would she ask?" It then occurred to Brucite he was not supposed to know her as T-15, and she pretended she didn't know him as T-74. He didn't understand why. "Unfortunately, I've only promised my life to King Citrine." He gestured to the armor to communicate what he meant. "Sorry, love, but I believe the Low King is already married," she joked. He savored her calling him love, even if it was an expression. He also couldn't believe she had a sense of humor. She always seemed so serious. Brucite smiled, but his heart dipped again. "Have you gotten married to your suitor from back then?" Her expression sobered. "No. He died not too long after we were promised." "What happened?" Jasper asked. I didn't take good enough care of him. He died from the frostbite because of my negligence. I forgot how much adjustment it takes for outsiders to become acclimated to our environment. That's unfortunate, but I doubt that was your fault, Brucite said. It was. Her eyes cast downward. Anna, don't be sad, her half-brother said. We love you. He grabbed her arm, and she tousled his long hair. I love you too. Brucite wanted to reach out to comfort her as well. He wanted this charade to end. They had saved each other's lives. He felt closer to her in some ways than he did with Basil. And Brucite wanted her. Unakite continued excitedly. I need your help when you have a moment. I'm struggling with ambushing an ermine. I've been trying to follow your instructions, but I'm not getting it. Anate smiled sadly at her brother. I'm sorry, Unakite. It's not the time for that now. You'll have to be patient. Unakite frowned and slouched, dejected. When you aren't training your siblings, what do you spend your time doing? Jasper asked conversationally. Seemingly eager to switch topics, she said, I hunt when I can, like the rest of my people. I'll sharpen my tools, or mend my clothes, or restore structural components of our shelters. Sometimes, when I have enough pelts, I'll make a blanket out of them. She looked to Brucite, but he didn't want to bring up his previous conversation on the subject of his outgrown coat again. Still, he was glad her attention was on him rather than Jasper. Carry people served the dishes. They wore the same garb as everyone else, so Brucite didn't think they were servants or slaves. All sorts of breads, meats, cheeses, berries, and nuts graced the table. His stomach craved the freshly prepared meal, and he couldn't wait to devour it. The carry served wine and ale in the dining hall, which he took in much greater moderation. What do you spend your days doing while on the march? She asked. Listening to the people talking around me, mostly, Jasper said. Antace turned her face to Brucite, though the rest of her body still angled toward Jasper. And you? Much the same, but there's one person that won't speak to me, and I don't know why, Brucite said, testing the waters. Perhaps they are unable to speak, Anate said. Oh, no, it's voluntary. They've muttered words before, but there's never been an explanation of why the interactions have been so short. Perhaps they don't like me. I can't imagine anyone would dislike you, Brucite, Jasper said. Another reason, then. Perhaps it would put them in harm's way to do so, Ante suggested. I can't see how that would be the case, unless they're a felon running from the crown by hiding right under its nose, Brucite said, his only suspected thought on the matter. That would be foolish. I'm sure they're not a rule breaker. Jasper's expression twitched upward. Perhaps it's for their own safety. Jasper's attention returned to Anate's. She smiled and clasped her hands together on the table. Scars marked each of her fingertips. Anates had noticed Brucite staring, and splayed her hands for him to see. I reopened these wounds when fighting a monster. Did you kill it? Brucite couldn't imagine the monster she fought to earn such peculiar injuries. No, but my mother did. Anyway, where are you all to visit next? The conversation stuck to lighter topics, and the group laughed together. Brucite shared in a few heartwarming moments between Anates and her brother. He would cherish the memories and planned to think of such merriment when the march resumed. Early in the meal, D4 had announced that they would make camp for the evening, outside of the Carey village, to ensure they gathered all the offered supplies. So the feast turned from a midday meal into afternoon drinking and then into dinner. The lady's youngest children ran around playing games after the feast concluded. For Brucite, it was odd to see children again, as he had marched with thousands of men every day, but it was a pleasant change. Anates joined in the fun, and she pretended to be the wolf whose pelt she wore while her siblings hunted her. She encouraged Brucite to participate too. With his clunky armor, he did his best to take on the role of a lumbering bear. Anates' siblings kept insisting he should play the role of a clumsy rabbit instead. As the children became tired, they drifted off to bed. The soldiers did the same, exiting the feast hall to the temporary camp outside of the village. At one point, Jasper had split off to engage in a conversation with a Carey warrior, and Brucite was glad the first sergeant left so he could enjoy Anates' company alone at the otherwise emptied table. I think one of your sisters bit my ear. I'll have to get Basil to look at it. He scraped away dried blood clotting on his skin. I apologize, we play rough. Thank you for including me in the game. It was fun. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Brucite waited for a moment. When she didn't continue, he asked, Where's your favorite place to hunt? She seemed delighted by the question. There's a frozen lake a little way off. The ghost caribou will stomp on the icy edges until they find water underneath. If the whole body's frozen, then they'll lick up the ice chunks. It gives a long window to get a good shot on them. Sounds practical. I've also seen a water elemental there, but it's rare, Ante said. Brucite wondered if it looked the same as the water elementals he had met at his family's harbor. I've only met the sea folk. The sea folk are saltwater elementals. The Undying live in fresh water, but their appearance is similar, Ante said. You would know better than I would. In their discussion, Brucite realized how far they had leaned in toward one another. Even though he had spent several turns of the suns and moons with her, he didn't want this night in particular to end. If this is the only day I can spend with her true self, I'll mourn for the remainder of the trip. Perhaps I can change her mind about remaining silent. His foolish, anxious heart beat so fast that the little wound of his ear opened and blood spilled onto the table. I should get this cleaned up, Brucite said, reluctant to leave to find Basil. I can help with that, she said. Grab the napkin and follow me. He stuck the serviette to his ear and hoped the magic that Basil claimed to reside in his own body would stop it for good. Antes grabbed a lamp sitting outside of the dining hall. We don't have far to go. How do you know how to stop bleeding? Brucite asked. Our people are called barbaric because we don't rely on the magic from mages. That means we take care of problems ourselves. How many wounds have you healed then? He asked. Plenty. When a new crop of hunters goes out, they're always getting banged up, chewed on, the usual. I bet I could treat wounds as well as your healing mage friend. Basil is good, but I bet you could best him. She smiled at the flattery. Hold the lantern for a moment. She forced open a door down the long hallway. How do you know which way to go in? She glanced at him incredulously for a moment. I live here, she reminded, shaking her head and leading him through another door. Of course. He was such an idiot sometimes. I have to stop thinking of her as T15. She's Anates. In the next room, he couldn't see anything. He wished for enchanted magic lights, like his parents' manor had. As his eyes adjusted, dark edges of furniture ate the candlelight. Come sit, she said. I need a good view of your ear. She sat him on a bed, and a few bottles clinked around in her hand. This must be an infirmary. She sat behind him. You can remove the napkin now. He was worried that, if he did, blood would spurt out from his ear all over her pristine white fur. Then he was keenly aware of how close she was, in a dark room, on a bed, with him. His heart must have been beating loud enough she could hear it. His face heated, his back sweated onto his under-armor tunic. He hoped she didn't touch his skin, if only so she wasn't repulsed by it. She was careful when rubbing down his ear with a cool liquid, much gentler than he anticipated. I can't understand what she wants. She sought me out of the crowd, asked me to play, invited me to this room, told me anything I asked about her or her people, and yet tomorrow I fear Anates will return to T15 again. She applied a cool salve and eased the pain on the tender areas surrounding the bite. Does she like me? Does she trust me? I think she does. Why wouldn't she grab the supplies and bring them back to treat me in the dining hall otherwise? There were still a few people lingering around, some Kerry. They could have protected her if she hadn't trusted me. Perhaps she hadn't thought to treat me in a public setting. I don't want to presume. Her hand on his ear stimulated him. He wasn't sure if it was because she was touching him, or if because his ear was sensitive. But either way, he was glad he was wearing his lower section of rigid armor. She wrapped the ear with a cloth bandage carefully, and she finished too soon. Brucite wished Unakite had bitten his other ear, so he could continue enjoying the sensation. She swerved around on the bed to face him, inspecting her work. That should hold for a few days. It'll heal by then. Sleep on your other side and don't get that ear wet. In the low light, her dilated dark eyes studied his ear. Her hand reached to check the other side. I'll be careful. Brucite stared into her eyes as long as he could justify. He wanted to remember her this way, carefree and happy. The tension between them felt like a taut bowstring. The closer they were to one another, the closer it was to snap. His gaze switched from one of gratitude to one of desire. She recognized the change in his expression, and her face changed too. There was very little distance to close when his lips met hers. He closed his eyes and enjoyed the feeling. His heart pulsed. He couldn't have been happier, and the tension was finally gone. Her hand moved from his ear to his cheek, and he cautiously placed a hand on her hip. Their mouths moved around each other softly, tongues learning to play together, and he loved kissing her. He wanted it to go on all night. The candle melt showed the passage of time when she pulled back from him, catching her breath. "Stay." "What?" he asked. "With me. Tonight," she said, glancing to the side. "Oh, Basil, what I would give for that." He hesitated. "I can't." "I suspected you'd say that." Brucite considered a solution. "What if you come with me?" "I can't join the crusade." "You're already in the crusade." But he couldn't say that. "We're picking up more people in every town we visit, both military and civilian. You could come as either. You would make a better soldier than I do." Brucite couldn't tell her no otherwise. He didn't want to hurt her feelings, but it went against everything his parents had taught him. She shook her head. Her response confirmed what he had been afraid of, that this encounter would be a single occurrence. "I can't stay if you can't come," Brucite said. "As much as I want to, I wouldn't be able to leave you after that." "Don't worry about me. I can take care of what I need to." "I couldn't handle it emotionally." He couldn't imagine how many meditation sessions it would be before he recovered. "We're at an impasse." "Can I just hold you? That would be enough." "Mm-hmm," she said, curling up on the bed, moving her hair out of the way. He took off his outer armor so he could feel her body, and not have uncomfortable metal plates in the bed, and he formed a spoon around her and kissed the back of her neck a few times. He didn't care how his body reacted now that the tension between them had snapped. It wasn't a secret he wanted to be with her. His hand held hers as they drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Brucite awoke to a black stuffed wolf toy staring at him from atop a bow rack. It took him a moment to realize he was in an empty bedroom. He should have figured he hadn't been in an infirmary, but he didn't care. He had stayed awake as long as possible because he feared he wouldn't see Anates again the next morning for a goodbye. And he was right. He wanted to mope, but he knew that the crusade would leave soon. After donning his armor, he left her bedroom. A few of the officers had passed out in a drunken stupor against tables in the dining hall. Brucite took that as a good sign that the muster hadn't yet started. As he left the manor and headed toward the smoke plumes off in the distance, he braced himself for seeing Anates again as T-15. Upon his return, he found Basil and Teleost eating the morning meal. "Where have you been? And where's T-15? Have you seen him?" Teleost asked while chewing on a block of hard cheese. "I fell asleep after the feast," Brucite said. "You dumb oaf," Teleost joked and paused a moment. "You didn't bring us back any food?" "You're eating the same meal now," Brucite said, with a motion toward the meat and berry-heavy spread. Teleost shrugged. "Just wanted to make sure they weren't holding out something better in there. I'll never get to eat a noble feast, but I guess this is the best alternative. Maybe I'll have to sneak into Panite's dining room while we're in Athlia. Our first sergeant told me I won't have management and administration duties then. It'll be another few turns of the moons, but I'll finally get a chance to explore a city and get a day off." "Mm-hmm." Looking around for T-15, Brucite had stopped paying attention to Teleost. When he couldn't find her, Brucite asked, "What have you two been up to?" Basil said, "As soon as you all left, the rest of us kept getting weird glances in the village, so we left and set up fires to prevent freezing to death. Eventually, we assumed we wouldn't be moving on, so we set up camp. I healed a few people, met with my master, aided Billet with some of his travails to earn some gem, and then after second sunset, bottles of wine circulated around camp. The carry also brought food out for us. I had to work provisions and restock the oxen carts, so I've had a glamorous time. What were y'all doing in the manor? Did the feast go on all day?" Teleost asked. "The feast went into the night. I got a chance to play with the lady's children, and there was drinking too," Brucite said. Overall, probably a similar experience, but indoors rather than outside. He did not want to talk about T-15 with them yet, even though she still wasn't with them. We're off toward the kingdom of Ikasu next, then? Teleost asked. Only after we make it through the rest of the Carry region, Basil said. When I was with Master Watercress, we looked over our maps. He says that the captain in charge of leading us is awful with directions, so he wants to know the way by heart if he needs to correct him. No offense to you, Basil, but why doesn't your master keep the maps? Teleost asked. Basil looked blankly at Teleost for a moment before saying, His pack is full, and he didn't want them to wrinkle. Teleost tilted his head in consideration and nodded a few times, satisfied with the answer. When his stomach growled, Brucite left them to find a meal for himself. Upon returning to the group, T-15 had joined them. Brucite pretended as if nothing had changed, as she did. So T-15, are you one of Lady Androdite's children? Basil asked. What possessed him to ask that? T-15 turned her head immediately to face Brucite accusingly. Why are you looking at me? In Brucite's defense, he hadn't told Basil anything. She realized her mistake and turned her head away from the group. Carefully studying her reaction, Basil said, I've suspected for a while now, given how you hunted for us and were more successful than the paid hunters were. It gave me the impression that you were practiced in this environment. Watching you spar, you're clearly a talented warrior as well. You disappeared to introduce yourself to Lady Frenite and Androdite, so you had noble blood. Since you didn't return last night, I assumed you had your own bed to sleep in here. She didn't glance at Brucite again. Brucite was impressed that Basil had discovered the truth on his own. Even though Brucite knew the same indicators, he wouldn't have drawn the same conclusion. I guess that would be a yes, then, Teleost said in response to the odd encounter. T-15 stood and tramped away. Muster will be soon, Teleost yelled after her. Why would T-15 look at you when I asked about Lady Androdite? Basil asked. She thinks I recognized her from the feast, Brucite said. She? Teleost asked. There's no way T-15's a woman. Brucite cursed himself inwardly. I met T-15 as herself. Basil looked at his friend skeptically. Go on. Brucite described how she wore her traditional clothes while eating together at the same table, and he suspected she was T-15. Although he didn't press him further, Basil's eyebrows knit together with additional questions. Muster started, and Teleost and Brucite checked in with their first sergeants. After Brucite announced his presence to N-17, he realized Anates was missing. In the shuffle, a disheveled soldier with a single tooth asked Brucite, I heard about your lady friend. Any chance you could point me to her? She's not here. I need to go find her, Brucite said without thinking much of the question. He considered where she might be, whether back in the manor or out for a hunt. Then he got an inkling. He looped around the village, in a broad sweeping circle, to see if he might find the frozen lake she had spoken of the night before. Luck was with him, and he located the lake. A few ghost caribou scampered away when he arrived. At first, he couldn't see anyone at all, but he scanned the branches of the evergreens, like where she had positioned herself when she had killed the ambushing Bahantry members. His eyes nearly swept over her, but the bronze of her armor gave her away. Please come down. Muster has started, he called. She didn't respond. If you don't make morning muster, you'll be abandoning your post. It's treason. You and your honor, she scoffed, reclining in the trees still. Please help me understand what you want, Brucite said. You know who I am, she said in such a way Brucite couldn't tell if it was a question or a statement. I do. When did you figure it out? Yesterday. How? He didn't want to tell her he had intruded on her family's meeting. Instead, he told a different truth. I know the way you walk, the way you eat, your mannerisms, your eyes. It was enough. I can't believe I've taken so many precautions and they still failed, she said, exasperated. There are more ways to know a person than by their face and voice. Brucite didn't understand why she was upset. Yes, but those factors give away much more information about an identity. I assumed I was safe, that it wouldn't be a risk to enjoy one night as myself, she said. Safe from what? Having your background exposed? Brucite hoped to get to the heart of the problem. I don't care if people know I'm Carrie. I don't care if they know I'm of noble blood or second born. I care that the soldiers don't find out that I'm a woman. Why? Brucite never considered that as a possible motivation. Some of the men have been brutalizing the female soldiers and merchants, she said. If they didn't know about me, then I wouldn't be a target. But if Basil could guess my lineage, then it won't be long until the others figure out more about me too. It finally dawned on Brucite. He understood why she never removed her helmet and why she never spoke. It concealed her gender. But then, while we were alone in your room, could you not trust me? Could you not tell me then? He asked. She turned her helmet toward the sky. You're oblivious sometimes, and that made me worry. Not that you'd reveal my secret intentionally, but that you would by accident. Disbelief churned in him, but she was right. If that was what the concern was, then I wouldn't have said anything. But I didn't know that was what you had wanted to protect. What do you mean? She asked coldly. I thought you were worried about assassins, not rapists. But, he admitted, after you left, Basil asked about you, and I accidentally used the right pronoun when I gave my answer. So you were right, I misstepped. But only because I didn't know. She didn't say anything. She sat there for a long moment, and Brucite doubted they would even be friends after this. The horn signaling the last call for muster sounded. Please, Brucite pleaded. Come with me. His same plead from the previous night struck a chord in him. He wondered if it did in her, too. I will muster, but I'm not coming with you.